afternoon. I'm Victoria Marshall with the latest news from the Washington Watch news desk. Senate Republicans on Wednesday blocked Democrats from advancing a bill that would have expressed the support of Congress for codifying a federal right to abortion. The measure failed by a 49-44 vote margin, with two Republicans, Senators Suzanne Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, voting for it. Democrats are hoping to restore a federal right to abortion after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June of 2022. And in another win for life, yesterday, Arkansas Secretary of State John Thurston rejected petitions for a proposed abortion amendment to the state's constitution. According to a letter Thurston wrote to Arkansans for Limited Government, the group spearheading the effort, the amendment was disqualified from November's ballot because the group failed to submit a statement identifying all paid canvassers by name. The proposed amendment would have allowed abortions through the first 18 weeks of pregnancy and in cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother. And fallout continues from President Biden's disastrous debate performance 2 weeks ago. 11 Democrats in Congress have now publicly called on President Biden to drop out of the 2024 presidential race over concerns about his cognitive state and ability to defeat former President Donald Trump. President Biden has resisted calls to drop out, saying that he plans to run again. Yet Democrats are not happy with this answer, and the pressure is mounting. Yesterday, actor and major Democratic donor George Clooney published an op-ed in the New York Times calling on Biden to step aside. Clooney wrote that we are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House, and we're going to lose the Senate. Mainstream media outlets are also reporting that former President Barack Obama is working behind the scenes to get Biden to drop out.
Let's say one thing that we do have to underline here, just so viewers can follow what's going on behind the scenes, is the Biden campaign and many Democratic officials do believe that Barack Obama is quietly working behind the scenes to orchestrate this.
According to a new ABC News Washington Post poll published today, 67% of voters say Biden should step aside as the presumptive Democratic nominee. And among those who say they will vote for him in November, 81% of them believe he is too old to serve a second term as president. And in other Capitol Hill news, yesterday, the House Judiciary Committee held a hearing on the World Federation of Advertisers Global Alliance for Responsible Media Initiative, or GARM for short. Through GARM, large corporations, advertising agencies, and industry associations participated in boycotts and other coordinated action to demonetize conservative platforms, podcasts, news outlets, and other content deemed disfavored by GARM and its members. Here's what conservative commentator and co-founder of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, told the committee.
In reality, GARM acts as a cartel. Its members account for 90% of ad spending in the United States, almost $1 trillion. In other words, if you're not getting ad dollars from GARM members, it's nearly impossible to run an ad-based business. And if you're not following their preferred political narratives, the ones that Kara Swisher and Dianne Feinstein would follow, you will not be deemed brand safe. Your business will be throttled. Companies targeted by GARM, like the Daily Wire, Breitbart, Fox News, and so many others, reach hundreds of millions of people with opinions and beliefs long established as within the mainstream of American conservative thought. GARM and its members have no respect for the beliefs of those people. They would like them marginalized or squashed. It's time to stand up for the First Amendment in this Congress.
Federal antitrust law makes unreasonable restraints of trade illegal, including certain group boycotts and coordinated actions that harm consumers. GARM's conduct may violate that provision, the House Judiciary Committee says. And finally, on Tuesday, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin announced that cell phones will be banned in public schools in Virginia. Youngkin said in a statement that this essential action will promote a healthier and more focused educational environment where every child is free to learn. Creating cell phone and social media-free educational environments in Virginia's K-12 education system will benefit students, parents, and educators. Virginia is following the footsteps of Florida and Indiana, which have also restricted phone use in schools. And those are today's headlines. I'm Victoria Marshall. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow.
From the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins starts now.
If I had not seen with my own eyes these children, I could not believe that a federal government agency is using billions of taxpayer dollars to place vulnerable migrant children into the hands of sponsors with criminal history, gang affiliation, to whom many are not even their parents. It is shocking and shameful.
That was a federal whistleblower, Tara Rodas. Welcome to this Thursday edition of Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. An estimated 500,000 children may be victims of human trafficking because of the open southern border. We'll learn more about this disturbing story when Tara Rodas joins us later on this edition of Washington Watch. Speaking of exploitation,
Iran is seeking to opportunistically take advantage of protest. The U.S. government will continue to vigorously support and defend Americans in their exercise of their First Amendment rights to protest and express political views peacefully. At the same time, we will continue to warn against expose foreign efforts to meddle in our internal affairs and attempt to amplify conflict.
That was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre reading her notes as she was responding to a question about Iran funding the anti-Israel protests that took place on college campuses. We're going to talk with Michigan Congressman Tim Walberg about that in just a moment. Also, House Republicans have passed appropriations bills for the next fiscal year that will fund about one-third of the federal government thus far. Now, the going may become slow as battles erupt over what are called riders, policy provisions attached to the spending bills. Now, this is the one opportunity that conservatives have to counter the radical policies being pushed by the Biden administration and funded by taxpayers. We'll talk about that as well with Congressman Walberg. And more evidence that the military under President Biden is marching to the beat of a leftist drum. Information from a Freedom of Information Act request reveals that leftist anti-Christian groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center are driving curriculum in Department of Defense schools. These are schools that the children of service members attend while living overseas. FRC's Senior Fellow for Education Studies, Meg Kilgannon, will join me for that conversation. The website, TonyPerkins.com, lots of resources there for you, and I encourage you as well to download the Stand Firm app. Go to the App Store, download the Stand Firm app, and you'll have Washington Watch, I'll get that out, right in your pocket. All right, by the way, more and more Republican-leaning voters are voicing concerns over the Republican Party platform as that information is beginning to get out. Now, they're concerned because there's a platform being advanced with scant references to God and little, if any, protections for the unborn. I'm going to tell you a little bit later how you can help send a message to Republicans. Before the annual August recess next month, House Republicans are continuing their effort to pass all 12 appropriations bills for fiscal year 2025. Now, among the appropriations bills remaining is the annual Financial Services and General Government Funding Bill. Now, this includes funding for certain aspects of the District of Columbia government there in the capital city. Now, some of these programs are drawing opposition from pro-life conservatives on the Hill. Joining me now to discuss this process and more is Congressman Tim. All right, I'm just being told that we don't have the congressman just yet. When he does join us, he serves on the House Committee on Education and Workforce and Energy and Commerce Committee. He represents the 5th Congressional District of Michigan. We're going to talk about the funding appropriations bills and what they're attempting to do is, instead of having this huge omnibus bill like we've seen for the last 20 years, they get down to the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, they don't have their appropriations bills, and so they just cobble them all together and they pass this massive bill, or they will do a continuing resolution and just keep the funding going from the previous year. Very irresponsible in the way they've been doing it. But under the leadership of Mike Johnson, they're working forward with the individual appropriations bills. Joining us now to talk about this, Michigan Congressman Tim Walberg. Tim, welcome back to the program.
Good to be back.
So, as I just mentioned, House Republicans have been very clear about passing all 12 appropriations bills and avoiding this annual omnibus scenario. Give us the latest and what the prognosis is on actually meeting that deadline.
Well, I think we're up to it if we can join forces together and decide that the perfect is the enemy of the good, or even in this case, sometimes the excellent. We know we have a very slim majority. 3 votes right now separate us from the Democrats in the majority outcome of a vote. So I'm hoping that ultimately we will get things done. I know that our Appropriations Committee is attempting to meet all of the budget requirements that our leadership has asked. In fact, working with Donald Trump as well, expecting that he'll be the next president. We're working very closely to make sure that the funding ideas and the priorities that he could work with best, in fact, what he did when he was president, is in place. So we'll keep working on that and see how things work out. But Republicans are independent, and sometimes that causes a challenge.
Well, there are more than just 3 votes that separate you from the Democrats. There are other things that separate you from them, including priorities. And that's one of the issues that kind of is front and center as we look at the funding for the District of Columbia. There is some funding related to the issue of abortion that could stall this latest funding bill. Tell us about it.
Well, I concur. We've attempted to take control of the District of Columbia on the issues, many issues, their legal issues, what they do with their court system, the prosecutors, and all of the rest. But the abortion issue is a thorny issue. I'm disappointed that the Republican platform was changed from what we have traditionally had in place in supporting life. I know that we won on Roe v. Wade, and we've lost in a number of states, including Michigan, the hearts and minds of people on the issue of abortion, and we have to win that back. But the District of Columbia, we do have power to control there, and yet there are viewpoints within our Republican conference, which is, I said, very limited in our majority, and some that come from much more swing district situations than a lot of us come from anymore. And so they're concerned that we would be seen as going for control of that issue from a federal level instead of letting states and locals do what Roe v. Wade, now being thrown out, will allow to do.
Let's talk let's unpack that for just a moment so people know exactly what we're talking about. We're not talking about a ban. We're talking about government funding in the city, and we're also talking about protecting religious freedom of employers so that they're not forced to fund things that run counter to their values. So it's different than the narrative that the left is pushing, that Republicans want to, ban all abortions. This is protecting the right of employers not to be forced to fund things that run counter to their deeply held beliefs. Correct?
Yes, on all sorts of things we have that same challenge, and there are those of us that are very firm that we stand with the Hyde Amendment and other laws that are actually in place, regulations about funding abortion and these social policy issues. But the battle is joined, and in a campaign year, with districts up for challenge in the election and attempt to keep those majorities, sometimes that causes a problem for a majority, even when we have a larger majority. I hope that ultimately Republicans will say this is not an issue that we should concern ourselves with from being attacked as trying to force unplanned principles on people. This is normal. We should not require employers to fund things that go against their long-held beliefs. We should not fund things that go against the law that are in place and that have been in place for a lengthy period of time. And I think those of us who are strong pro-life, we should be allowed to very strongly state, tell you what, if we believe that states ought to make their own decisions on that, then let's take control, because in the District of Columbia, we as Congress, we are their legislature, we have control, and we ought to take that control.
A very, very good point. And I think we need to articulate that point, as well as the role that the federal government continues to have to protect the rights of states to actually determine the way they're going to go. But we just have a couple of minutes left, Congressman Wahlberg. I want to switch topics. This week, the director of national intelligence said the Iranian regime has influenced pro-Hamas demonstrations throughout the United States. Now, you serve on the education committee. You have been in some of these hearings about what's been happening on college campuses. What do we know about how Iran has been funding and promoting these anti-Israel, anti-Semitic demonstrations on college campuses?
The first thing I say, Tony, is surprise, surprise. I mean, are we really surprised about this? I think on education and workforce committees, we've held hearings with Columbia University, MIT, Penn, et cetera, in front of us. And we've seen two college presidents lose their jobs because of what we were able to bring out about how they allowed these demonstrations to go on. And not just demonstrations, but the impact upon Jewish lives on their campuses and allowing radicals to come in outside of the campus, outside of the student group, and promote this not simply demonstration, but violence on campus, taking over campus facilities, holding captive campus employees, etc. Why wouldn't we think that there was an outside source coming in? We said that in our Education and Workforce Committee. We pointed to actual examples of outside motivators for this and facilitators for this. Iran, that has lost all a challenge from our federal government, specifically this Biden administration, which took off the sanctions, etc. Why would they not see this as an extremely opportune time to try to downgrade the United States? They have called us the large Satan. They've called Israel the little Satan. They've said they want to destroy and wipe off the face of the earth both Satans, the United States and Israel. Why would this be a surprise? And I think now, because of what's going on with President Biden in melting down, now the administration and people's response with understanding what's going on from outside attack forces coming to the United States are willing to finally admit, oops, Iran is in paying and facilitating these things going on campus, not simply to cause unrest on campus, but to break down the Western leadership in the world, and that's the United States.
And we're up against that break, Congressman Wahlberg, but the funds that they had to fund this, to fuel this, were probably coming from the funds that we released to them, the frozen assets that was a part of the sanctions.
Surprise, surprise. I mean, that's exactly what we feared when we broke down the control that President Trump had significantly put on them and said to the world, we're taking a stance. Biden did away with that.
Yeah.
And those resources were available. Plus,
we're paying for it. We're paying for it now, all across this country. Congressman Tim Wahlberg, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to see you. Thanks so much. Keep fighting.
We will, believe me. All right, stay tuned, folks. On the other side of the break, more Washington Watch as we take a look at a disturbing story. As we look at children being brought across the border to be trafficked.
Join us October 3rd through the 6th as we gather with spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives from across America at the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit in Washington, D.C. We'll pray for our nation, engage in government and culture, and stand for biblical truth alongside Christian leaders, worldview experts, and government officials. We'll discuss important issues like the sanctity of life, religious freedom, protecting students, strengthening families, praying for our nation, and how you can impact America's future from a biblical worldview. Our nation stands at a critical juncture, and we must ensure that the issues impacting faith, family, and freedom are understood and advanced. Register by July 31st and receive a $70 discount off admission. Register now at prayvotestand.org. That's prayvotestand.org.
Hello, I'm Jody Heiss, president of FRC Action. Here in America, we thank God for the right to vote. and we can all agree on the importance of this upcoming election. Many of us want to support candidates who share our values, but we're not comfortable supporting the big national political organizations. Well, we have a solution for supporting candidates through FRC Action's Faith, Family, and Freedom Fund. Being a super PAC, it allows for unlimited individual and corporate donations, so we can endorse and fund campaigns for people who share our values. By giving to this fund, we're able to pull all of our contributions together and support and endorse like-minded candidates. That's how we move the needle. So let's be the best stewards possible and get the most out of our political contributions by uniting our efforts. For more information or to contribute, visit faithfamilyfreedomfund.org. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Sometimes the headlines are overwhelming, and it feels like we're all alone and there is nothing we can do. That is exactly what the enemy wants us to believe. Reading through the Bible, there are many things that are counterintuitive. One of them is that God never uses a majority. It is always a minority devoted to the truth. Here at Family Research Council, we are grateful to stand side by side with other believers for the truth. And as a result, God is making a difference. When you partner with us, you are joining with Christians around the nation in standing together for the truth of God's Word, supplying pastors and parents and school boards with training and resources to stand up against the indoctrination of our children. Together, with God's help, we can preserve freedom for the next generation. Go to frc.org and become a stand member today.
Welcome back to Washington Watch as we are broadcasting from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the site of next week's GOP convention. This week was the platform committee meeting, which I was a part of. It was a farce, but we'll talk about that later. All right, this week, 3 Republican senators on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee hosted a roundtable to discuss the exploitation of unaccompanied migrant children coming to the United States due to the Biden administration's border crisis. Well, testimony at the roundtable revealed that tens of thousands of children are now unaccounted for in what whistleblowers have called government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded child trafficking. Yes, you heard me right. Joining me now to discuss this is one of those whistleblowers, Tara Rodas. She worked for the Department of Health and Human Services and testified before the committee. Tara, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much for having me on Washington Watch today. And it's unbelievable that we're going to be talking about government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded child trafficking.
Well, first, I want to thank you for testifying before the committee and being willing to be public about this. Now, you previously reported what you had learned to Department of Health and Human Services. Tell us what happened when you reported that.
Yes, so I and some of my colleagues began reporting trafficking cases in June of 2021. So if you can imagine, it's been more than 3 years. And in the beginning, they seemed kind of okay with us reporting the trafficking. We actually thought that people were going to be doing stuff about it. We thought that they were taking this very seriously. But then sadly, when we found the worst case, which was known MS-13 gang affiliate sponsoring 2 children simultaneously, unfortunately, that led me to being swiftly retaliated against and walked off the site and had my badge taken. It's what we call being perp walked. It's to scare you and to scare everyone around you from ever coming forward to speak the truth.
So for just doing your job, reporting what was happening, to your superior, saying, hey, this is happening, you were fired?
Yes. Fortunately, I was on loan. So I had volunteered for this mission. I've been a federal employee, although today I'm not speaking on behalf of the government. I've been a federal employee for more than 20 years, and HHS knew they had a crisis on their hands at the beginning of 2021. And they made a call to all federal employees and all agencies to give their employees for a detail, so kind of on loan.
Right.
So fortunately, when they walked me off the site and took my badge, they were hoping that my agency would fire me, but my agency absolutely stands up for people who tell the truth. And they swiftly, took control of the situation. They offered actually to send armed agents to escort me from Washington, D.C., or from California back to Washington, D.C. So
Wow.
my husband was already there and I didn't need the escort, but it was nice to know that my agency was standing for the truth.
That is encouraging to know that there remain those within our government that want to do what is right. Explain a little bit, share with our viewers and listeners what you saw. And I know that this is not just one incident, but you began to see these patterns. Share that with us.
Yes. So what's happening is people believe that this program is a humanitarian program. And that's what I believed. And that's why I raised my hand and said, send me. I will go help these children. So everybody believes that this is a family reunification plan. That's what they say. And that's what I thought. But what's really happening is that criminal networks that are operating here in the United States, and we saw this in multiple cases, the children are being lured by people here who are part of these networks. They are in debt bondage for the journey. So smugglers are bringing them to the border, and then our fine Border Patrol agents are turning them over to HHS, and we are then sending them to a random person here in the United States that the child gave as their U.S. point of contact to Border Patrol. So you can imagine how easily a system like that is exploited. You have a person
Right.
here recruiting people. They're bringing them with a smuggler, right? The children are coming from Guatemala, El Salvador, all over Central and South America with smugglers. The smugglers give them the name and address to where they're going. The children turn that into Border Patrol. Border Patrol turns it over to us at HHS, and then we send the child to that person. It's
No
really end-to-end
verification.
delivery.
No verification of relationship, family connection, or anything. It just, you got an address, you got a people, and you just turn them over, right?
Well, so sadly, there is no ultimate verification, because if your listeners will and viewers will look at the documents that Senator Grassley actually dropped today, because he believes in evidence, you can see that there's, in this first case, especially the MS-13 case, they did not even verify if the person was a legal permanent resident. And they actually said most likely illegal. So there's no way for us to know criminal history on a person who's not here legally. So when they say there's vetting going on, that's really not happening at all. We're not capable of doing that. And no child welfare organization around the globe would send a child to an unknown person to a home they never see. That doesn't
So,
even make
Tara,
sense. And yet that's what the government's
where,
doing.
Tara, where are these children ending up in terms of some of the testimony, forced labor? I mean, they're being put into the sex trade. I mean, what's happening to these kids?
Yeah, well, sadly, we have testimony of the children. Hannah Dreier of, very unlikely source, the New York Times, has gone all over the country and talked to these children in terrible labor trafficking situations, and children who've died here, falling off roofs their first week here in the United States in a job that they're not qualified to do. So children are dying here. But then when undercover journalists have knocked on the doors of addresses we've given them, children are saying, I mean, we had a child in Texas say, my sponsor, she tells me she's my aunt, but I've never met her. And she's pimping me out for sex in the home where I'm living. The stories that the children are telling are horrific. There are children in crisis now, and we need to rescue these children.
And this is being funded by tax dollars. I mean, we're bringing these children to this country and allowing them to be exploited. This is, as you said, horrific. Tara, we're out of time. I want to, again, thank you for being public on this, and thank you for coming on Washington Watch today.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
And folks, we talk about pray, vote, stand. We need to be praying, and we need to vote for those who will stand up and defend the most defenseless among us, children. All right, speaking of children, we're going to talk more about that after the break, so don't go away. More Washington Watch straight ahead after this break.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to this Thursday edition of Washington Watch, and we're broadcasting from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the site of next week's GOP convention, and it was the site of this week's Platform Committee meeting. And some of you have been asking what's next in the effort to keep the Republican Party pro-life. What will happen to the minority report that we've talked about? And how can you help stand for the unborn? But before I get to that, I want to kind of continue this conversation, although it will be with myself, regarding, well, you, that we just had with Tara. I mean, I hope you were disturbed by that. The fact that we are bringing, attracting children, paying for it, funding children to come into this country, handed over to, in not all cases, but there's an abundance of evidence to suggest it's happening a lot, allowing children to be exploited, to be put to labor, in some cases sexually exploited. I don't know about you, but that bothers me. And as taxpayers, we're funding that. But that really does tie into what I want to talk about now, and that is the Republican Party backing away from its staunch position on life. How do you get to a point where you can use a child for your own purposes? Well, it's when you lose the fact that they are created in the image of God and therefore they have value. And that's why it hasn't been perfect by any means. But the Republican Party staking out that ground for the last 40 years, recognizing that a child is created in the image of God, therefore worthy to be protected and welcomed into our world and protected under our laws, while aspirational, has been significant. And now the party's departing from that. I, for one, I refuse to go with the winds of the culture. I believe as Bible-believing Christians, we must stand for truth, whether the current popular political party or candidate stands with that or not. I don't care. I'm going to stand on truth. Now, you'll say, well, why are you involved in the party, Republican Party? Well, because in our political system, we have two parties. And you've got to be involved in one or the other if you want to make an impact on the political process. And for years, Christians have increasingly been attracted to the Republican Party because of its definitive recognition of God as the author of life and the one who gives us our rights. They don't come from government, they come from God. And the party has recognized it until now. In the 2016 platform, 2020 platform, there were 15 references to God. In this one, 2 passing references. And by the way, for my fellow Second Amendment supporters, no reference to the Second Amendment in this platform. None. Zero. Now, let's get to the issue of life. This platform is woefully inadequate in communicating a definitive position on the protection of human life. Now, as a delegate to this committee, and I've served on a number of committees in the past, I would describe this platform as, a concise statement of campaign priorities, but not a bold, enduring declaration of principles like Ronald Reagan called for in 1976 that really launched the Republican Party into being the majority party. And worse than the actual document was the process. It was a choreographed process overseen by a very heavy-handed chairperson. And this is, I don't like to call names because so many of these people are my friends, but Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn was unbelievable. I mean, it was shocking. They allowed for no amendments or discussion before forcing a scripted vote. Now, this process done in secrecy behind closed doors, quite frankly, is unbecoming of a party that champions free speech and due process. Ironically, the document itself calls for vigorous defense of free speech and the end of government censorship. Well, deprived of the opportunity to actually discuss this so-called draft document and strengthen the weak platform that lacked the party's historical stand for the unborn, there was a group of us delegates that have submitted a minority report to supplement the platform. Now, we could use your help because the party needs to know that they cannot deviate from these non-negotiable issues. The issue of the sanctity of human life. And by the way, its statement of marriage was very weak and open to interpretation. They need to hear from you. The delegates had basically a gag rule put on them. Their phones taken. Media was not allowed in. So most people don't know what happened in the room. But fortunately, I have a microphone, and I can tell you. It was despicable. It was disgusting. It was not befitting of a party that claims to be a defender of law and order, due process, and the freedom of speech. It's certainly not a party that claims to protect the unborn. So I want to challenge you to stand with us and send a message to the chairman of the Republican Party, Michael Whatley, and to the chairman of the Platform Committee, who is the one who oversaw this process. That is Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Let them know that this is not acceptable, that you want a party, you want representatives who will stand for the unborn, recognize that our rights come from God, and not silence the voice of those they disagree with. Text the word report to 67742. That's report to 67742, and you'll have a link so you can take action. They need to hear from you. They've heard from me. They need to hear from you. Text report to 67742. That's report to 67742. Please stand with me as we stand with children and the defenseless of this country. After the break on Washington Watch, more Washington Watch coming as we take a look at the Pentagon. That's next.
Download the new Stand Firm app for Apple and Android phones today and join a wonderful community of fellow believers. We've created a special place for you to access news from a biblical perspective, read and listen to daily devotionals, pray for current events, and more. Share the Stand Firm app with your friends, family, and church members, and stand firm everywhere you go.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Again, help us communicate to the chairman of the Republican Party, Michael Whatley, and the chair of the Platform Committee, Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Text the word report to 67742. That's report to 67742. Our word for today comes from Psalm 44. You are my king, O God. Command victories for Jacob. Through you, we will push down our enemies. Through your name, we will trample those who rise up against us. How will this victory be achieved? Now, do not read this as how Israel will obtain a military victory. Read it as to how you can experience spiritual victory in the challenges and opposition you face today as a follower of Christ. Look at verse 6. For I will not trust in my bow, nor shall my sword save me. It's not our technology or even our tenacity. Rather, it is through your name, the name of the Lord, that we will trample those who rise up against us. We must not be timid in following the Lord in both our words and our ways. We must not shrink back from our public identification with the Lord Jesus Christ, because He is our victory. To join us in this journey through the Bible, text Bible to 67742. Well, a recent watchdog report has revealed that the federal school system for children of military personnel pushes diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology on students while also promoting progressive and social justice activism. Of course, this is funded with your tax dollars. According to a report from Open the Books that includes an analysis of Pentagon internal documents, the Department of Defense Education Activity published a strategic plan called the Blueprint for Continuous Improvement, which outlines how DEI will be intentionally integrated across the entire organization. Even more disturbing, the report details how staffers recommended books for children as young as kindergarten that included main characters on the gender and sexuality spectrum. What else is the Department of Education or Department of Defense's Education Association pushing on military children? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies at the Family Research Council. She previously served in the Department of Education in the Trump administration. Meg, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Good to see you, Tony.
So fill in the details on this curriculum that we're talking about and who is actually producing this curriculum.
Right. Well, this is something, one of the things that I just love about working for Family Research Council is because we are looking at issues related to the family and society and defending God's truth on basic issues of confronting our country, we see things before other people see them. And we have a paper on our website that is dedicated to the issue of Southern Poverty Law Center's influence on public education. And unfortunately, that influence has extended into the Department of Defense education schools. And this shouldn't be surprising because the superintendent of schools for the Pentagon is an alumni, shall we say, of Fairfax County Public Schools, which is known for its woke ideologies as well. So he's taken his, political beliefs and is enacting them at the defense schools. It's really a shame to think about soldiers serving in, overseas. That means they're likely serving in harm's way, and sending their children, taking their families with them, sending their children to Defense Department schools. And imagine, being deployed in harm's way and coming home and having your child, your son identify as a daughter or daughter identify as a son, and then to know that the first some of the first people in real life who affirmed those fantasies for your child were in the school that our government is paying for, and that you as a military officer or enlisted man entrusted or woman entrusted your children to. It's horrifying.
By the way, folks, if you'd like to see this for yourself, I mean, I know we're not making it up, but if you want to look at the pamphlet, what Meg was talking about, go to TonyPerkins.com, and there's a link there for the SPLC's Radical Learning for Justice program. Meg, so the DEI, and this is part of, we're talking about this in part because we want people to know what's going on with their tax dollars, but this is a part of the debate that's taking place over the National Defense Authorization Act, because that's what funds the government and some of these programs. But not only is it the gender ideology that's working its way into, but what really grabbed me when I saw this was that you got men and women who are serving in our nation's military, as you described, potentially putting themselves in harm's way to defend our country, but their kids are being taught basically to hate this country in some of this radical SPLC pushed material.
It is that part is especially appalling. I mean, the idea that that men and women who love their country enough to lay their lives down for our nation and for me and for you and for everybody watching, that we would undermine their children in this way and fill their heads with these kind of anti-patriotic sentiments and just, it's not just that they attack the country. When you go down this road, it's because these revolutionary activists and ideologues who write this material want to tear down our nation because they hate God and they hate America and they hate the family unit especially.
Right.
And so it's just it's hard to find the words really to describe how appalling it is. And the fact that it's being done right under our noses with our taxpayer dollars, and we've known about it for a long time, is I really hope that members of Congress will see fit to doing their best to get rid of this kind of thing in that school system and in all school systems, because it has no place in the American educational system.
Yeah, we're having a hard time this week finding the words to describe the things that we're seeing. It's beyond appalling. So let me ask you a question here, because I know we have a lot. I hear from them. We have a lot of military personnel who watch and listen to this program. What do they need to be looking for? What questions do they need to be asking to find out what's happening in their schools that their children might be attending?
Well, yes, for the children, it's always important, that family dinner. It's so hard to schedule, but it's so important to have that time with your family to go over their day, go through the backpack that comes home from school. You need to look at all the papers. Go with your child. If there's a computer issued, you need to go with your child online and look at the textbooks that your children are reading. And a lot of times schools will send at home a parent link to textbooks so that you can access the material. but you really need to use your child's link and go through your child's access so that you can see what your student is experiencing and what they're being taught. And this was, easier during the virtual learning because you could watch the interaction. But just because kids are back in school doesn't mean you should be any less vigilant about what is going into their brain and how they're being formed as children with ideas, because it matters. It matters. So the other thing about this program is that it also.
Let me stop you. Are you suggesting that some school districts would give the parents a separate link that would be different than what the children would actually be viewing and looking at?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That is not just some, that is common practice. Yes, that is what happens. So you need to go on with your child's link. That way you can see their grading, you can see their communication with the teacher, you can see everything that you should be able to see as their parent because you're responsible for them and that is your duty to oversee. So you need to go on with their link. And it is, I had 4 children and they were close in age and they were going through school at the same time. And it's a lot to keep up with. It really is. It's really a pain. And you want to say, I go to church with this teacher. I know the school. I'm there all the time. I can trust these people. And, maybe you can, but you need to be sure that you can. And you need to do your due diligence as a parent to make sure that you know what's happening in your child's day.
Wow. When I was in school, it was just, Mom just needed to make sure she got my peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the bag. Now there's so much more you've got to look after.
And you had a textbook coming home that she could flip through,
yeah, that's
right?
true.
And papers she could
That's
see.
true.
That was much easier.
Well,
so
when I brought them home, they usually conveniently got left behind. You had another thought there that I cut you off on this discussion because I'm going to go to another topic here as soon as you bring in that other idea.
Just quickly, the other part of this is that they don't just work over the kids with this radical ideology. There are a lot of moms who when the family goes overseas, sometimes the mom is the teacher in the school, and so this has got professional development, they call it, in the curriculum for the teachers too, so that they can be aware of their unconscious racial bias or whatever the woke terminology may be that is implying that we all are just secret closet racists and incapable of human relations of a kindly nature. That it's incredibly insulting and demeaning and divisive. And people are really tired of this kind of divisiveness in society. And so, it's not just the students who are under this threat, it's also the teachers.
But you got to say something, I guess we could borrow that line from the TSA. If you see something, say something. Don't be silent.
Right.
All right, I want to switch gears here. This is not an education issue, but it touches on the military and SPLC, two things that we're talking about here and you're very familiar with. A photo was circulating yesterday on social media platform X that revealed that a deck presentation for training at Fort Bragg, now identifying as Fort Liberty, an Army base, referred to pro-life groups as terrorist organizations. What do we know about this?
Well, this is education, right? This is an education issue because it's training for soldiers. So once they work this out on your children, they bump it up to the parents. This really is horrific when you think about it. Again, finding hard to have the words to say that soldiers serving on a base on American soil who are serving our country would be told or taught that their fellow citizens, maybe their mothers and fathers and their grandmothers and their aunts and uncles and grandfathers, are terrorists because they support organizations or because they pray outside an abortion clinic or because they donate money to a crisis pregnancy center. I mean, this is just, beyond the pale. And
in one of the organizations,
God, literally,
thank God
that someone pointed this out.
Yeah. Someone took a picture, a screenshot, and circulated, but one of the organizations identified as a terrorist organization was National Right to Life. I mean, these folks have been around forever, and all they've done is advocated for the unborn. And the list of activities that could make you a terrorist are picketing. If you picket, you could be a terrorist. Well, I wonder what happens to all those unions out there that Joe Biden has walked with.
I didn't see the United Auto Workers on that list, Tony. Did you? I didn't see them.
But this, I know we're kind of joking about this, but it's so outlandish, but this isn't the first time this has come up. Now, there has been a statement that has come forth from Fort Bragg, now called Fort Liberty, that says that this anti-terrorism slide was posted on social media. After conducting a commander's inquiry, we determined that the slides were not vetted by appropriate approval authorities and do not reflect the Airborne Corps and Fort Liberty, the U.S. Army, or the Department of Defense. I've heard that before. In fact, I can't even recall how many times I've heard that once they've been caught. Then they say, because Family Research Council, American Family Radio, Alliance Defending Freedom, we've all appeared on these slides at one time or another by one of these presentations. When they get caught, they say, oh, no, we didn't approve this. Same thing happened with the Southern Poverty Law Center with the Federal Bureau of Investigation with Catholic churches. Remember the memo? We didn't know anything about it. It wasn't approved.
Sure. Well, Tony, have you been invited to Fort Bragg or any place else where you've been maligned to explain your views and to explain to people why you do what you do and how it's an important part of our self-government of our country that people be actively engaged in the political process and that they be free to discuss ideas and free to express their religious convictions? We never seem to get those invitations, right? Fort Bragg has rescinded this and done so on social media. But do the men and women who experienced that training get a corrective lesson that it's okay to oppose Roe v. Wade and that in fact it's been overturned? I mean, this is a question I have, and I never really get a satisfactory answer.
This is taking indoctrination to a whole new level, and again. Elections have consequences, but I'm thankful. I don't know who it was. They didn't take ownership of it, but I'm glad that someone snapped that picture and put it out on social media. Obviously, the RNC was not running that session because they would have confiscated their phones so that they couldn't take a picture.
Well, I would expect that phones will now be confiscated, right? We're not going to be getting many more pictures like that because people don't like getting caught up to their evil deeds, right? So,
but if you see something, say something. Meg Kilgannon, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Seriously, if you see something, say something. The only way we keep our freedom is that we use our freedom. And I want to ask you to use your freedom to speak to the RNC and let them know that they're watering down of their statements for the protection of human life and their recognition that our rights come from God is not acceptable. And again, I said this earlier in the week, I would not give another dime to the RNC. But I want you to send a message to the chairman, that is Michael Whatley, and also to the chairman of the committee, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Text report to 67742. That's report to 67742. And help us take a stand for life. All right, folks, that's all we have time for. So guess what? Just keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.